Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The following conversation that I have today at the masjid in regards to justification for a husband to hit his wife, I want to be very, very clear. Muslims have a severe problem with domestic violence, and I don't want anyone to take this talk of mine the wrong way. And so it's very important to understand what I actually said and in the circumstances where it might be allowed, okay, and where it is allowed rather. And so I'm not apologetic about that, but at the same time I don't want someone to abuse the teachings of the Quran in the wrong way, okay. And so let me just start at this point, and then I'll have some concluding remarks too. Let me share with you something before I begin. You know, in the Sharia, if a father and two fathers are sitting down, or a father and some young man is sitting down, and the father says to the young man or to the other father, "I give my daughter to you," just this word, and the other party says, "Yes." Now nikah is done. Technically what? Nikah is done, but it doesn't have mahar. This is generally nikah done for the young children. In the Indian subcontinent, we have something called mangni. Mangni ho gaya. You all know this concept, right? Engagement. But in the Arab world, they used to also do nikah in this fashion. That the father or the wali used to offer. And you know, the children are relatively young. They don't know each other that well. And the father would say, offer, you know, somebody in the family he trusted, "Your son will marry my daughter," and they would say yes. So technically this was what? A nikah. Now that girl grows up with a certain mindset that she's going to marry this boy, right? Now if that engagement breaks, it's going to be a heartbreak for either her side or his side or both sides. Now why am I raising this? In Surah Al-Baqarah, there are 2 ayat on this issue. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cares about women and women issues. That Allah even addresses that girl, jiski keh sakte mangni hui hai 5-6 saal se, right? Or toot gayi hai, right? What to do in that circumstance. So Allah says that when you have not touched them, and you have not had a mahar or had a mahar, both conditions are there. If you haven't had a mahar, then you know, at least give her some gift. The boy's side should give to the girl's side what? Some gift, because feelings are going to be what? Feelings are going to be hurt. Maybe her feeling is hurt, right? And if there was a mahar set, if there was a dowry set, then you should give what? Half the mahar. Give half the mahar. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cared so much. You know, we know about the rights of the women already. We already know what the Quran said about the girls that are buried in the ground, right? بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ, from the very beginning. You know, out of all, like the Prophet was the mayor of Medina, like the mayor, the governor of Medina, right? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So many events are coming to him. Not every event that was happening in the, you know, this person's coming with a problem, this person's coming, not every event became part of the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Allah chose specific events amongst them that then became part of the Quran, became part of the word. One of them is, قَدْ سَمِيَ اللَّهُ قَوْلَ الَّتِي تُجَادِلُكَ فِي زَوْجِهَا. That there was a man, he was an old man and an old woman, and the man said, you know, "You're like my mother." And this is technically a divorce. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about, قَدْ سَمِيَ اللَّهُ قَوْلَ الَّتِي تُجَادِلُكَ فِي زَوْجِهَا. Allah has heard the argument that this old lady was having with the Prophet. That, look at this old man, he needs me, but he's divorced me. What do I do? Right? And she's arguing with the Prophet, even though the Quran says what in Surah Al-Hujurat? لا ترفعوا أصواتكم فوق صوت. Don't raise your voice above the Prophet. But here Allah is appreciating this old lady going to the Prophet and arguing with him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about the situation with her husband, and in a sense the stupidity that he did, right? And so there are many cases like this. One of the other things that are very interesting in Quran about Quran and women is that, you know, Quran always wants women to have a support system. I'll give you an example. If she's going to get married, it's better she has a wali. She should have some support, some man who is looking after her issues in her affair as a support system in her. In the same way, when it comes to testimonial, you know, when you go to the judge and he's going to put you aside, let's say there are different parties, he's going to take them all into the room, what's your story? And what's your story? And what's your story? Right? If the woman goes into the room of the judge, right, where he's going to interrogate her, what's your story? Quran says she shouldn't be alone. She should have what? Another witness with her. She should have a support system with her. She should not give testimony. She cannot be interrogated alone. A woman cannot be interrogated alone. She has to have a support system with her. This is the purpose of the testimony is actually taken from one. The only reason the other person interjects is if she makes some mistake that she knows about. Okay? So Islam cares so much about women. So then why did Islam allow that men can hit women? Why? So this is what I want to explain to you today. How much time do I have now? 5 minutes? Okay, perfect, I think. Okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about a certain type of guy and a certain type of girl. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is the general statement. الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. Men are the caretakers of the women. Now before I begin, I want to mention a few more things. There's no institute in the world where you have two, what? Leaders. Does ever anyone complain, why do I have to listen to my boss? It's an institution, right? A marriage in Islam, marriage is an, what? An institution. If a wife goes into marriage thinking that we're both equal, then what will happen to the arguments? There's no end. There's no end. And you know what's the worst argument in a marriage? It's the argument that keeps coming up, and keeps coming up, and keeps coming up. You know, there's the one-time argument, like I'm driving, she says go right, I say no, I think we should go left. So it's a one-time thing. But then there's, let's say, the thing that is the argument that keeps coming up in the relationship. Let's say it's about where the children go to school, for example. You know, I'm just giving some example. But arguments that keep coming up hurt the, what? Relationship a lot. Those are the arguments. And also I want to start, before I talk about this topic, it's very important to also admit something very important. And that is that there is a lot of domestic abuse done by Muslim men to their wives. This is a fact. I get the cases all the time that Muslim men are abusing their, what? Wives. So I'm giving this because before I explain this ayah, this needs to be said. Okay, so الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. Men are the caretakers of women. In Islam, marriage is an institute. And in this institute, right, if their final decision has to be made by someone, the right is given to who? To the husband. That's just how it is. Now, there are reasons for that, which I'm not going to go into because that would be a whole lecture. But I want to explain to you this part of the ayah. الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. This word rijal, men. Rijal means what? Men, not dhakar, male. Men is used in Quran for the true believers, for the gentleman, for the man who would never hit a girl. I'll give you some examples. رِجَالٌ لَا تُلْهِهِمْ تِجَارَةٌ وَلَا بَيْءٌ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. The men who, rijal, the word rijal is used, okay? This word used in Quran, rijal, is a very interesting word. This is about men who really fear Allah. رِجَالٌ لَا تُلْهِهِمْ تِجَارَةٌ وَلَا بَيْءٌ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Those men who, despite their business and busyness, and they're busy, they never forget Allah. رِجَالٌ لَا تُلْهِهِمْ تِجَارَةٌ وَلَا بَيْءٌ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيَخَافُونَ يَوْمًا تَتَقَلَّبُ فِيهِ الْقُلُوبُ وَالْأَبْصَارُ. They establish the prayers and they fear the day where the eyes will be overturned. Another example of the word rijal. رِجَالٌ صَدَقُوا عَلَى مَا أَحَدُوا اللَّهَ عَلَيْهِ. Men who have kept their promises with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So men is not just male. There's a lot of male and very few men. Get it? What I'm trying to say? In the Quranic, it's very close to the Iqbal's concept of mard-e-momin. If anyone ever heard of Iqbal's concept of poetry, mard-e-momin, you know, he uses this term in his poetry a lot. Mard-e-momin, who is the mu'min man? This is ar-rijal. So ar-rijalu qawwamun 'ala an-nisa. Men are the caretakers of women. The type of man that is being referred to here is a man who is already a gentleman, he's already civilized, He's the type who would never think of hitting his wife. Now, having said this, any wife can anytime say to her husband that I want a divorce, right? And she can go to the court and get a divorce. She can do that anytime, for any reason. It should be generally a good reason, but in the time of the Prophet, somebody even got a divorce because she didn't like the way her husband looked. Even though, from the perspective of Allah and Islamic judges are not just going to say, oh, he doesn't look good, I'm going to give you a divorce. It's not going to happen. You have to have a good reason, generally speaking. Right? So anyway, so why does Islam allow, or in which circumstances? Now I was invited to a university and this topic came up. Why does Islam allow men to hit women? And I gave a very long answer, which the short answer I'm going to give you today. Look, in Surah An-Nisa, this is, in which surah is this ayah? Surah? We're going to read this ayah today. Okay? That's why I'm talking about this. So in short, this is one of the answers, and one of the scenarios, and one of the answers regarding this issue. In an unapologetic way. Okay? And that is that Quran divides women into two types. There's muhsanat, women who are used to being in a family life. Women who are what? Used to being in what? She had a father, she has uncles, she has... And generally women, a girl expects her husband to treat her the way her father, what? And her uncles treated her. If the father was abusive, then she's going to be okay with her boyfriend or husband to be what? Abusive. This is just how it is. Women that come from family backgrounds, there's a term for those women in Quran called what? What is the term? Muhsanat. Husn means a castle, a fortress. She has a support system. So women that come from a family background and that, civilized, you can say, living, women are called muhsanat. Then the other women are called those women who've had to fend for themselves. This is important to remember this. And also it's important to remember something very important. Every relationship challenges boundaries. If there's an employer, the employee will challenge, how far can I what? How far can I go before the boss becomes upset, right? The same thing with all boundaries between the parent and the child. Have I gone over time?
Yes.
Okay, what should I do? So then inshallah I'll continue. Huh?
You have to pay us.
So, here. So, the woman that comes from a background where she's used to violence, she was growing up in violence, when she marries a nice man, what happens? She's pushing the boundaries, and he's being what? He's being nice. Right? She's pushing the boundaries and he's being what? Nice. And anytime there's a conflict, this girl, because she comes from a certain background, every time she starts thinking of jumping ship. Because in a family, people are used to fighting and they know it'll be like this. But people that come from violent backgrounds, anytime there's a conflict, they think they have to what? Jump ship. So let's say, in one instance, she's talking to another man. Or she's talking to somebody on Facebook. These are real examples, by the way. Right? In a case like this, the husband says to her, and it's not out of anger, because anger has gone away, dissipated, because you have to do two things before you can hit her. You have to warn her, and then you have to separate what? Her bed. She thinks the reason he's being nice to me is that so I can go to bed, so he can go to bed with me, right? That type of girl is told, no, that's not the reason I'm putting boundaries on you, not because I can go to bed with you, I'm separating the bed. Because she came from a background where she thought a normal man is like her dad who used to hit her. And a normal man is like her boyfriends who used to hit her. And here's this chicken guy, right? Like he's a chicken. I push him all the time. I break the boundaries all the time. He never does anything back. So here's this type of guy, and she's married to him, and she feels something's off. So she goes across the boundaries that are too far, and then now when he gives her these steps, he's not angry anymore, right? Because he's following a step. Anger is something that happens spontaneously. Now, if he hits her, now she'll know, or because of her history, it'll actually help her to become a good person in that family, because that's what she needs. She needs that level of, you can say, not violence is not the word, but you can say shock therapy. She needs that level of shock therapy to be able to go from a place of غير المسافحين. غير المسافحين are women who live in a violent situation, but now they want to be chaste. Women who want to be chaste, but they're not there yet, but they're married. And so they then become muhsinat. Then they have to make that transfer. Now, what does Quran say after this? Very quickly. If there's a problem in psychology, what happens when you bring the whole family together? What is it called? When you bring the whole family and you tell somebody you're an alcoholic and you have to admit you're an alcoholic. Intervention. So the next ayah says, let's do intervention. Bring her family and his family, let's sit down and talk about this issue. And let's have them both face this issue. Right? Anyway, there's much more to say about this, but think about it and see if it fits with, or it makes sense to you. Assalamu alaikum. So at the end, I want to be very, very clear that we are talking about a situation where there is muhsanat, women that grow up in a family life, and they're used to living in a family life. And so those women is not what I'm talking about. But women, particularly, which Quran describes as muhsinina, غير musafihat. Those women that are in the, they haven't lived that life of chastity, and they haven't lived in an area where there is a positive environment. And so when they get married to a guy that's gentle, they think of him as a wimp. He's a wimp. And so, like I said, relationships cause boundaries. Everyone tests their boundaries in relationships. And so, here she is, with this nice guy, and that's not what she's used to. She's not used to that from her boyfriends or people in the past or her dad, and she needs somebody aggressive. And so Islam makes sure that the guy doesn't take any steps out of anger by telling him to warn her, and then she thinks maybe he's nice to me because he wants to be with me, he wants to sleep with me. And so then you show that, look, I've given you the warning, I'm not sleeping with you, that's not the reason I'm saying this. And then you take the bold step of using force. Okay, now let's say there's one thing that I do want to share with you that's very important. So just this aspect, because there's a lot of aspects to this, but I want to show that I think majority of the married women right now in the Muslim world are not of the background of muhsinina ghayra musafihin, those that are trying to become chaste, or that would be women who didn't have Islam, they converted to Islam, they come maybe from low income, they had to fend for themselves, now they've become Muslim, and they're not used to nice guys. And of course, don't forget, Muslims nowadays, a good number of Muslim men are not very nice. So we have to keep that in mind. What I did want to share with you is this another thing, that when the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not to leave marks on women and not to leave a mark on her face and her body, this is why women bruise more easily. Okay, women bruise much more easily, and this is perhaps the reason the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu gave the example of the miswak, meaning not to hit her with miswak. That's not going to change behavior. That's not going to modify behavior, because modification of behavior will only happen when you try to use the force that she's used to from the past, right? But you have to be very careful how you use that force, okay, and how you hit her, and to show her that you are the man, you're not just some wimp, that she's just not used to nice guys around her. And this is why women bruise more easily. And so this is perhaps why Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu also said to hit them with the cloth. So leave me your comments, your ideas. Tell me what you think. Is this, in this case, these two types of women? And don't forget, this ayah is in Surah Nisa, and the first time the topic of muhsanat and muhsinina ghayra musafihat is first time also mentioned in Surah Nisa. So keep this in mind, and inshallah we will. And then tell me in your comment section what you think. Is there any other
ideas you have about this verse, share it with me. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And tomorrow I will be doing the 5th juz, and in the 5th juz these verses will come and this topic will be discussed, in which you can actually see the flow of how this discussion comes in, and that has another dimension to this topic. So inshallah ta'ala, jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Make sure to subscribe today, and make sure you like, and make sure you leave your comments and ideas. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله